So you may get a little message box telling you we are recording. Just want to let you know. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our current session is about and the future sessions that we're going to have. All right. This is put on by the Finance Committee. I'm Kathy Ford. I am the CFO. I've been on the Finance Committee for about 5 years, but this is my first time as a CFO. We have another returning member of the Finance Committee, Carol McMillan, and 2 new members. We're very happy to have Indrani Chatterjee and Jesse Powell. So today we are going over what every branch finance needs to know about filing government forms. And why do we pick this one first? You know, maybe that how to do branch finance sounds pretty interesting to start out with, but the reason we started out with the tax forms is that they're due pretty soon. So we wanted to give you detailed instructions and where to go to fill out those forms so you could meet all the deadlines. But the next one in December, we'll go over the resources and examples you need to go over all the duties that you would have as a finance, the branch finance or treasury function. And in March, when we're getting closer to the renewal for membership, we're going to go over what's all the hub about, how to record membership dues. And then at the end, in June, we're going to go over branch finance reporting on how your year-end reports will be used to support all the government forms you'll have to file in 2024. So we hope you will join us and your peers to learn more about and share ideas about branch finance. So I'm just going to share on this. And I want to introduce, just to explain in detail, you're going to see us either going through the website with the branch finance information, and it has a lot of information. It's a valuable resource for you to learn more about what you need to do in each category. So we hope you'll see what those resources are and you will start to use them yourself. As I said, I'm Kathy Ford, but I want to introduce our other members, and they're going to tell us a little bit about themselves, their background that is of particular interest for what you need to do in at AEUW. So Carol, can you tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, I'm Carol McMillan. I moved to California 2 years ago from New York, where I spent quite a number of years. My career was with the Girl Scouts of the USA. So most of my experience in finance is from the nonprofit sector. I moved to New York to the national headquarters in 1988, and I took up the position of providing consulting services to Girl Scout local affiliates on things including finance, property management, governance, membership development, and so on. When I retired, I joined our local AEUW chapter, which was a great experience, and I had a lot of fun with that, and shortly became the treasurer of the branch. And I've also served as treasurer of one of the choral societies that I've sung in. So that was really what I brought to the table, was a pretty broad experience with nonprofit management that eventually also took me to almost 20 years as an adjunct faculty member in the master's program in nonprofit management at one of the universities in New York. So I'm happy to be with you tonight. And this is my second year on the finance committee. And I must say, when I moved here and started looking at the California website and all the resources that were available to branches, I thought, oh, where was this when I was starting out trying to figure out what I was doing in New York? So we're really, really lucky that there's been a lot of work over the years to make the resources available. And I think, Indrani, are you going to tell us a little bit about you?
Yes, sure. I'm Indrani Chatterjee. This is my first year in State Finance Committee. I joined AUW Torrance branch in 2001. At branch, I served as International Relations Chair, Treasurer, and as branch president. Also, I served as International Advocacy Representative under State Program Committee from 2015 to 2020. I'm a life member of AUW National. Also, I served as a finance director for North American Bengali Conference Project, hosted by my community organization, Dakshini, in 2003 at Long Beach Convention Center. I managed 600K fund budget, and that event was 4,500 guests attending. I have been living in Torrance, South Bay area, since migrated from India in 1984. Professionally, I worked as an accountant for both public and private companies. Happy to be with Kathy's group tonight and hope to help everyone. Thank you. And now, JC.
Hi, I'm a retired certified public accountant. I've been in practice for almost 40 years. I began my career with Kenneth Leventhal and Company in West Los Angeles, and then we moved our family to the Inland Empire, and I joined a small CPA firm in Redlands, California. I became a partner in that firm in 1987. I specialize in nonprofit and governmental entities, and including preparing financial statements and preparing the 990. I retired from public accounting in 2019 when my husband and I moved to the Bay Area here in Novato. I joined AAUW in 2007 and was very active in raising funds for the AAUW fund through the branch theater event and assisting treasurers with accounting for branch activities. In 2017, I converted the branch from a 501c4 to a 501c3 because of their substantial community support from donations for their STEM conferences and community members desiring to be able to take those donations as a tax deduction. I also assisted the branch in merging a subsidiary 501c3 into the branch. I just recently joined the AAUW California Finance Committee, but I've been very involved in the background for my branch for about 8 or 9 years at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. All of my nonprofit work has been at AAUW. Before I was CPA and worked in companies that were in the for-profit sector. So I have been a branch treasurer. I have been the branch tech direct coordinator and treasurer. I have been a camp treasurer for the virtual camp and the financial liaison. So pretty much everything I have done for a nonprofit has been AAUW, and you can see I've hit most of the treasury type functions. So we hope that this gives you a pretty good idea of the broad background that the Finance Committee has. So if you have questions because you want to take advantage of that expertise, let's say you want to convert your branch to a 501c3, then we've got people on this finance committee that could assist. Any questions you have after this, we're certainly going to ask for questions. We hope you will give them to us. You will have to use the chat function, and Carol is going to be monitoring that. So at the end of our presentations, we can go over all the questions that you might have. So be sure to use the chat function if you hear anything that you have a question about. And after our peer group session, this will be recorded, but if you have questions later, you can always send them to me at cfo@aauw-ca.org. And I will push them to the person who's most capable of answering your questions. Okay. I'm going to one thing I want you to see, this is the home page for the state website. And to get to the information you need about branch finance, you would go to branch schools, branch finance, and you're going to see 6 boxes of categories to have if you have any questions. And here is the government documents and deadlines, and it's going to have all your information. There was a webinar on it. You can watch that webinar. You can download the presentation, see sample forms, and see the questions and the answers from that webinar. Where we're going to spend most of our time is right here, annual filings. And this is the guts of this. It gets you to where you need to go for every one of those forms. So when you click on here, you're going to see all of these forms, plus some that you may or may not be using. But if you go in and click on one of those, like here, you're going to see, the forms, and you can link to those forms on the government website that you need to file with. So that is something we want to make sure you're aware of, and it'll be interesting to see where you are now. So now you know a little bit about us, and you know about the website that I hope you will all be able to use as we go forward. But we'd like to know a little bit about you as well. So we have a poll. I'm going to pull it up. It'll just take a minute or so. Please answer all 5 questions, and you can tell us about yourself. So it just...
Kathy, while people are doing that, someone suggested that everyone mute themselves.
Yes, good idea. Yes, if you mute yourself while others are talking, it'll make it easier for everyone to hear.
I can do that.
Okay, can you all see the poll? All right, we're getting some answers. All right, we have 42 people in our peer group, and there's still some answers coming in. you a few more seconds here. All right. I can go over what we've got so far. We have 39 of the 40 participants that are here. What I've got in answers to the first question, what is your position at your brand? We have 36% are new brand treasurers, 40% are returning brand treasurers, 13% brand president, 5% other, and 5% just interested in the topic. What are your branch gross revenues? 88% are 25,000 and below. And that's generally what we see here. And we focus on the forms that a branch that's in that category would be interested in. The other 10% is 25 to 50,000. A lot of the forms are looking for under 50,000. The N forms, the 990N and the 199N, the RRF1 and the CPTR, those are all pertinent for those categories. And we have 1 out of the 40, which works out to 3%, that's above 50,000. What is your branch tax exempt status? We got about a quarter are 501c3, 55% C4, and we have 20% who are not sure. So you should see that in your permanent file type documents that would indicate what your status is, your IRS determination letter. So the other question, the fourth question, is your branch incorporated? We have 23% yes, 48% no, and others that also don't know. If your branch name doesn't include Inc. in it, you probably are not. How familiar are you with the branch finance? Well, we have one person who's memorized it. Thank you very much. A good chunk of you have done a summary review and are very familiar with it. 63% you've looked at it more casually, but are aware of the topics, and 18% have not looked at it yet. So we hope that this session will introduce you to the website and you will be able to see that. So you can see very quickly what it looks like. And thank you for responding. That's pretty consistent with prior webinars and sessions on taxes and other programs that we have, that we're pretty consistent with what the makeup of our branches are. Most are 501c4, most have under 50,000 of revenue and that type. All right. We are now going to go over to we're going to have Jesse is going to present about a very important form that you would all be filing or could ask National to do. And Jesse's going to talk about that. That's the Form 990. So I am going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, let me bring up what you're interested in.
PDF 1.
Yes. All right.
Okay, I can get started while she's working on that. Virtually all exempt organizations, including 501c4s and 501c3s, have an annual reporting requirement to the IRS. The purpose of this reporting requirement is to ensure that the exempt organizations are following IRS regulations and, very important, that they are adhering to their exempt purposes. This requirement can be accomplished by filing one of the following. Sounds like most of you will be using the 990N, but I'll quickly go over the other two forms. Okay, so as you recall, Kathy was on the website, and this is basically a screenshot of the website that will allow you to go directly to the IRS websites and file the appropriate form. This is assuming that you're not going to have National file it for you, but down in the grayed out balloons, you will see you can just press on those buttons when you get to our website, and it will immediately take you to where you need to go. So the first form I'm going to talk about is the Form 990 Information Return. This form is very detailed and requires a lot of information. Any exempt organization that has gross receipts in excess of $200,000 must use this form. The next form is the 990EZ, and some of you will be using this. It's an information return that is less detailed than the 990, but requires reporting a variety of items, including revenues, expenses, fundraising activities, scholarship recipients, how the organization handles its activities, just to name a few. Any exempt organization that has gross receipts in excess of $50,000 must use this form. The next form is the 990, better known as the e-postcard. Small exempt organizations can satisfy their annual reporting requirements by using this form if their gross receipts are less than $50,000. It's important to point out that the gross receipts test cannot include any costs or expenses. If your branch must file a 990EZ or a 990, you can click on the appropriate balloons that I just pointed out a few minutes ago, and it will take you to the IRS website and give you information on those specific forms, instructions on how to file them, and for you to actually be able to file them. Both the 990 and the 990EZ must be filed electronically. You cannot do either one of those forms manually. It may be best, if you've never filed either one of those before, to consider using outside help. Now we're going to go to PDF 2, page 3. All 990s are due November the 15th of the 5th month from the organization's year end. For all AAUW branches, the date is November the 15th. For small exempt organizations filing a 990N, late filing, there is no penalty. However, if the form is not filed for 3 consecutive years, the nonprofit will lose their tax exempt status. This is also true for those organizations that are required to file a Form 990EZ or a 990. In this case, they can file for an extension that will give them an additional 6 months. But the failure to file the 990EZ or the 990, even if you're on extension, will cause you to pay considerable penalties. So keeping on this same PDF, if we go to the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2, there are some additional rules for the filing of a 990N if you're in a borderline situation or if you're a new branch. So if you're a new branch and you've been in existence for 1 year or less, and your gross receipts are less than $75,000, you can still file the 990N. If your branch has been in existence for 1 to 3 years and your gross receipts average $60,000 for the first 2 years, then you can still file a 990N. if you have been in existence for more than 3 years and your average gross receipts are 50,000 or less for the immediate preceding 3 years, and in the current year, then you can file a 990N. So just to be clear, if you've been filing a 990EZ and your revenues drop down, you probably are not going to be able to file a 990N in the current year because your 3 past 990s were in excess of the $50,000 average $50,000 mark. So now we're going to go on to what your filing options are, and we're going to go to PDF 3. The best possible scenario is for you to ask National to file your 990N for you. This is very efficient and it's very, very easy to do. So I highly recommend that all of you who have not filed your 990N yet and know that you're below the 50,000 mark, just go ahead, go online, press the various buttons to get to the community hub and get it done. It's very simple. Okay, so the trick is, however, that this is due by October the 15th, which is what, a week and a half away or something like that. So you have to get it done very quickly. How do you do that? Well, you scroll down and click on IRS Form 990, ask National to file it for your branch, scroll down and click on the gray, what's that? On the screen when you're actually pushing the buttons, it's a black balloon and it says go to Community Hub. Then when you're on the Community Hub, and I don't know how many of you have been on the Community Hub yet, I'm hoping everybody, but you go on the Community Hub and it leads you to your individual page. And then you click on your affiliate. So for most people, your affiliate will be California and your local branch. My branch happens to be Redlands. So now, Kathy, if you go to PDF 4, one of the issues with doing this presentation is that we couldn't really click through and go to this form because we'd have to go to an actual branch's affiliate tax information. Now, I've used ours because we have to file a 990EZ. So I went on there and I'm showing you the information that you need to provide, and it's pretty straightforward. It only asks you for basic information, including your EIN number, state how much your gross receipts are, hopefully $50,000 or less. You must have an email address and include it here. You must complete the regular address information, and you must indicate the principal officer for tax. Usually this is the treasurer or the finance officer, and potentially most of you. So now we're going to go back to the PDF 1. If you decide that you want to do your own 990M, and again, I say there's no really good reason to do that unless some situations have come up that we haven't thought of, but you're much better off having National do it for you. But if you have to do it yourself, the deadline is November 15th. You can only do it online. So the way you do that is you scroll down and click on the Federal IRS Form 990, 990EZ, or Postcard 990N, and click on the black balloon that says File e-Postcard Form 990N. It will immediately take you to the website where you can start the process. The process includes you having to register with the IRS before you can complete the form. Now, if we could go to PDF 2, page 2, bottom of the page. So the form requires you to have your EIN number, just like national. You need to know your tax year. Everybody here, their tax year is June 30th. Your legal name and mailing address, and the name and address of the principal officer. Generally speaking, this would be the treasurer or the finance officer, and also your actual gross receipts of $50,000 or less. So that's about it in filing a 990N. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to talk about the California's equivalent to a 990N, which is the 199N and the 199. Thank you.
And
All right.
Kathy, I'm going to interrupt just for a second again. There's someone on a phone that starts with the area code 530, and it would be helpful if you can mute yourself because we keep getting a little bit of background information of noise. So whoever is on the area code 530. I'm not sure that Kathy has the ability to mute participants. So thank you.
All right. We're going to go in. I'm back on the website. And as I said, you go into the home page, Branch Tools, Branch Finance. And here is the topics that we're talking about today. And I'm going to do a little bit using the download of the webinar that was done before. And this summarizes requirements for the 199. So if you are filing a 990N, you are also probably going to file the California Franchise Tax Board Form 199N, also an e-postcard. So this is for small exempt tax organizations, the same group of branches that would file the 990. And if you're under 50,000. Now, the branches need to file this. You don't have the option of asking national. They don't have people who know California tax requirements or the other states. So you got to do this one yourself. And what's the deadline? The usual one, November 15th. They all kind of target that 5 months after year in. So what you want to do, you have to file it online. Makes it simple to do and very quick, but you only have a limited amount of time to do it, or you have to start over. Fortunately, it's 20 minutes, which is quite sufficient, especially if you have all the information you need to start. So you need your branch entity number, that's the California organization number, or if you're incorporated, the corporation number, your branch name and mailing address, the accounting period, which is our fiscal year, which would, the one you're filing on now started on July 1, 2022 and ended on June 30th, 2023. So you have that, your FEIN number, which are something you had to know for your 990 as well. Gross receipts, that's the number they're asking for. So we have had some sample forms in here and it indicated 9,700 for gross receipts. And that is total gross revenues. It's not, you don't deduct expenses from it. You don't deduct, if you've had a fundraiser, you don't give the net number deducting the fundraising expenses. It is the total gross receipts number. So you report that, and then you give, again, the principal officer name, address, and phone number, and that's going to, generally it's going to be the treasurer with their personal information on that. So if you've got all that ready to go, you file directly online, you access the form under financial documents and deadlines, and you start out with putting in your entity number and your branch should pop up. You will eventually receive a confirmation number once you complete that. And I do suggest when you do this, you're going to input the information, then you'll see a screen saying this is what you input. Is it correct? And if it is, then you can submit. But I would print the pages that say, is this the correct information? If you have to edit it, you have a way of doing that on the screen. But when you're finished and you're satisfied, print it first, and then you're going to get a confirmation number for your records, which is proof you successfully filed. So print that as well so you can do that, have that confirmation that you did meet the requirements. So we're going to go back to, and I'm on the website, so we're hoping that this shows you how you can use it. Again, as I said, the annual filings is the guts of this. This lists all the names of the forms that are covered, but you click here to actually get to the forms where you can select them and get onto the website where you need to file them. So here's the one, the Franchise Tax Board 199N. And if you click on the file form 199N, if you put in that your entity number, it should come back and say, here you are, your Beach Cities or your Torrance, whatever. So you fill in that information, selecting 199N, and before you begin, you are, if you would put what it's saying is be sure you have that basic information. They'll say your entity ID. Once you put that in, you're going to see everything that you're going to see your branch name. And if it's not your branch name, something's wrong, or it could be you just had a typo when you were inputting the number. But you should be, it takes 5 minutes. If you have your information and you know what your gross revenue is, it's going to take very little time to do it. And then you're essentially done. So if you don't meet the requirements of the 199N, you're going to have to do the file form 199. And you would go in here, and this, as you can see, has a lot more information to input. They need more detail, and they're essentially going to ask the information similar to what a 990 would require. So there aren't too many of you that are in that position, so we don't expect you to have, most of you to have to do that. And again, as Jesse was saying, if you have to go to that extent, you probably want to get a little bit of assistance to at least have a professional who specializes in nonprofits look over your forms. All right.
Kathy, I think it would be good if you could go ahead and just show the hub and asking National to file at this point.
Okay.
Yesterday, that.
Did the pets have their dinner?
So on the this is for the 990. Right.
Right.
So here you log in. So you log in there. I always save my password here, so I don't have to remember it. So here it is. Now the advantages I have as CFO is that I am on everybody's, and this is just to help. If you go in, let's say I know Beach Cities is, get this. And what we were trying to do is you want to click on my affiliation. And for you, whoever you have identified as your branch, you have paid dues or a dual branch membership, those are going to be your affiliations for the most part. So here, I hit Beach Cities because I was treasurer there until the end of the last fiscal year. This is the blue dots. Remember, this is for the 990. You can't get National to do the 199. So you hit that, and then you hit tax information. Now, because you can quite early, around April or May, you can go in and have your information filled in. I am getting the information. If you see this, it means it's already been filed. It'll show 2 years. So last year, I filed it, and my preference is to go in because they're only asking you, is your total revenue under 50,000? And you should have a pretty good idea, even if you go in April, that whether it is or not. So it will ask, it has the EIN number when you pull it up. Our gross revenues less than 50,000. What you see here is what I input. These are the questions you're going to ask and what they're going to have. And then I listed my name, the PO box, address of the branch. And yes, if it's a PO box, you can use that. And the tax year. And I was the submitter, so my name is there. So once you've done it, after that, you get a chance to post the most current year you did. If you see this information, they've got it through and they're going to file for you. So, does that help? Has anybody done it yet? Yeah.
See a few hands.
Good. That is something, it's easy to get out of the way. As soon as, and again, April, May, you can go on and make that happen. Okay. Have to get out of all this. Now we're going to have Indrani come on, and she is going to talk about the RRF1 and the CTTR. And again, this is a progression of reports that the state of California has asked for those charitable organizations that have less than 50,000 of revenues. So they start out asking, on the 199 end, then they get progressively more curious and start asking for these additional forms. So I turn you over to Indrani.
RRF1 report is due on November 15th for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. All branches must file the report before or by the due date. Extension for file form RRF1 is allowed if the branch has received an extension from IRS for filing Form 990 or 990 Easy. Now, RRF1 form, all form should be included the fee, amount of fee that is based on your branch revenue. It is listed how if the branch revenue is less than $50,000, amount will be $25. Between 50,000 and 100,000 will be $50. Between 100,001 to 50,000, $75, and go on. Now and Kathy, go to top of the page. Yeah. Top is very easy. You have to include the name of your organization, address, city, town, zip code, telephone number, preferably finance officer, and email address, so that any question they can contact. And this side, all the tax charity registration number that you usually get from Attorney General's office. Franchise tax board number, give you the California tax ID number that goes to under corporation or organization number, and EIN number that comes from IRS. Kathy, now go to part A activity. That is the actual revenue, that total revenue you have recorded at the end of your fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2023. Before that, you have to complete the accounting period that because all branches are fiscal period, you have to include the beginning period, which will be July 1st, 2022. Ending period will be 6/30th, 2023. Total revenue and total asset, program expenses, and total expenses you have to include. This is the form. We can show you, Kathy, the completed form. We can show you how the completed form, as an example, how it will look. Yes, this total revenue is $9,700. Asset, program expenses, and total expenses. These are the amount you already have from your final financial statement from fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. That should not be a problem then. And then you will fill out Part B. Part B, 9 questions that you must fill out. Otherwise, the Attorney General's office will not accept. Number 6 is the raffle question. If your branch has hosted any charitable raffle event, then you will check the box yes. And Carol will talk to you about the raffle rules, regulation, and applicable uses. And then branch of finance officer should sign and date the form and fill it out with the supplement form CTTR-1, which is the annual treasurer report that nowadays Attorney General's office has a requirement. Kathy, go to CTTR. This is the blank form, and we have an example with a completed form also. Same information you will include over here that you have included already in the RRF form, and then balance sheet in detailed information you have. Attorney General's office required the detailed information to be completed by the branch. And that cash and everything, cash, revenue, expenses, liability also. And we can show you the example that we have it. Kathy, show the example completed form. This balance sheet and this total asset. The very important thing is that total asset amount in this form must match with the RRF1 form. And total and the other liabilities and total asset and the revenue will be on the bottom, must match with the RRF1 form. Total expenses must match with RRF form, and program expenses, which is required by the RRF form, it is included in the other expenses. Kathy, can we share the PDF?
I've got it.
That is the one, other expenses.
Yeah.
I think we need to have a little more. Yes. And this is the other expenses, all include program expenses included in the other expenses. which is separated in the RRF1 form, but it is included under other expenses when you file CTTR-1 form. This form also balances must match with the RRF1 form and CTTR form. And both forms must be signed by the finance officer of the branch, dated, and I will recommend to file this. Don't wait until the last day. File at least 10 days prior to the due date with the appropriate fee, $25 or $50. Depends on the revenue of your branch, and make check payable to Department of Justice. And these are very straightforward form, and already you have completed your financial statement for fiscal year June 30th. And therefore, I'm sure you have all information to complete these two forms. And now I will ask Jesse. Jesse will talk about S1, SI 100. Thank you.
Okay, so filing the California Information Statement SI-100 is only for those branches that are corporations. So if you're not a corporation, or if you're thinking about becoming a corporation, this is one of the forms that you will have to file. This form is to be completed. The purpose of this form is to update the state of California regarding your corporate address, officers, and who is responsible for service of process. The return can be filed either electronically or you can do it in a paper format. The fee for filing this form is $20, and if you want it certified, then it's an additional $5. You will need to know your corporate identification number, the year in which you were incorporated, list of officers, and the person responsible for what they call service of process, usually the treasurer or the finance officer. We go to PDF 6, please, Kathy. The Form S-100 is required to be filed biannually, meaning every 2 years. And you have up to 6 months to file it. So 5 months before up to the last day of the year that you, the month that you were incorporated. The California, when you go onto their website, they have a handy dandy chart to tell you the time frame of when you need to file. So, for example, if you became a corporation in an even year, let's say 2002, then you will always file your SI-100 in an even year. And this page tells you exactly if you became incorporated in January, you can file this form starting in August, and as long as you have it done before the last day in January, you're good to go. So now we're going to talk about how you can file this tax return. It's PDF 7, Kathy. If you file online, you will need to complete the cover sheet. This gives information about you and how you're filing, information about you and that you're the person that's filing the statement SI-100. So you need to fill out this information, and then if you'll scroll down to the next page, we'll see that this is the SI-100. It requires a variety of information, including your EIN number, your Secretary of State number. You also need to put in an address. And here's the tricky part about this form is that you cannot use a PO box. So usually what happens is, because at least in our branch, the treasurer is an every 2-year term, you would put in if you're the treasurer, you'd put in your own address. And then when the next treasurer comes up, then she'll put in her address. You have to list all the officers of your branch. And then if you go down a little farther, you will see that you have to also include the name of the person that is filing services process. And this means that if the state needs to get a hold of somebody, they go to this page and they pick that person to contact. So they'll need to enter their name, their address, no PO boxes, etc. Let's see, lost my train of thought. One of the things about being a corporation is that California, especially if any of you are familiar with a regular C corporation or an S corporation, California notifies you before the due date that you have to file this form. So I recommend that if hopefully your branch has a PO box, and that you use that PO box for these kind of filings so that you can get that notice, because that notice doesn't need to have a street address. It only needs a delivery address. So that makes it a little bit easier. If you choose, you can have an email address. Either way, you just have to decide on this form and then sign it and date it and either mail it in with the $20 or go online and file it electronically. Okay, so now I will turn the program over to Carol, who will be discussing requirements for holding a raffle.
Yes, thanks, Jesse. So yet again, one more set of forms, and in this case, a different filing date. Because and just this year, the state has established that if an organization holds a raffle, that the raffle year is going to be the calendar year. So that it's that previously was a September date, which actually worked probably better for us since most branches are, goes with our fiscal year, but it's now going to be the calendar year. It's important to realize that in California, raffles are considered gambling. And so the state has quite a few requirements to make sure that if you're conducting a raffle for a charity, that it really, the results are going to the charity. And in fact, one of the rules is that 90% of the proceeds from the raffle need to go towards the charitable purpose. So that would be something to look at. If you want to get a good overview of the state requirements, you can go to this first section, nonprofit raffle regulations. And if you click on this little button here of the Attorney General's raffles overview, you can see a few specifics. And if you just keep scrolling down just a little bit, there's quite a nice, it's about a 20-minute webinar, which again goes over the rules and the filing requirements. So if you need a refresher as you're working on your plans for the year, this is the place to go. So in terms of how to file your application for a raffle, as I said, the new raffle year is going to be the 1st of January to the 31st of December. And if you're planning to hold a raffle, then you're going to need to apply 60 days ahead of the first raffle. Now, some branches may hold multiple raffles in a year, and so you can apply for all that you expect to hold at the same time. Here's the blank form that shows you what you're going to fill out. The important part of this, and just scroll a tiny little bit more, there we go, is I think we said that about 25% of the people on the webinar are 501c3 organizations. So they would check this box 23701D for religious charitable, that would be us, organizations. And if you are a 501c4, then you would check 1F, which is civil leagues, social welfare organizations. And that just establishes sort of your tax deductibility status. Let's take a look at a completed sample form. And this, again, this is based on the same information that you saw in Indrani's report as well. So here's our sample organization. They're planning to have a raffle, a few raffles, and we can see that as we scroll down a little bit more. We see they're planning 3 raffles during the calendar year, and they're submitting it by the 1st of May, so that they're 60 days ahead of that first raffle. So that is the application portion. When it comes to reporting, now we'll go to the next set of samples, and the completed form. Let's go ahead and do the completed example. Yep. And so here we have our branch, which completed it. They're completing their year. If you've applied, let's say you applied for 4 raffles and you only held 3, it's all right. Just go ahead and report the raffles that you did hold. However, if you applied for even 1 raffle and you didn't hold it, you still need to report, because you're now in the system of the state saying, oh, here's somebody we should be getting a report from. So you would still send in the report, but with 0 results. Again, you see here your various, your state number, your federal EIN, and then once you've filed your application form, you're going to have a raffle registration number. And here's the financial results. You can see that they raised $705 and that the direct cost was $30, so well within that 90-10 rule. Maybe they had a speaker who'd written a book, and they had a copy of the book that was given to the winner of the raffle. And so we're going to say, yes, that our 90% were used. Sorry, Kathy, I made a mistake yesterday. This should say no. So did the direct costs exceed 10% of gross receipts? And the answer is no, they did not. It is possible, if you have other expenses, you can cover them from other sources. And in that case, you would have to answer these 4A and 4B questions. Maybe the raffle item was donated, or that the branch had some other funds, and the purpose for which the funds were used, again, to make sure that it is a legitimate purpose. So then scrolling down a little bit more, we now see we have verifying a few of those other particulars. You can keep going down the page a little bit. And again, you're verifying the 90% of the funds that they were not provided to anybody else. They're very clear that they don't want want paid professionals to be running raffles, so that we're not dealing with any shady customers here. And this was one that I thought was interesting, that the tickets were not sold, traded, or redeemed over the internet. I know that in our branch, at least, that I think we did sell some tickets on the internet last year. And when I saw this, I thought, well, that probably wasn't a good idea, that we want to just have the tickets sold in person so that you can answer, correctly to that question. So that is the completion of the form. And again, that has to be filed by the 1st of February the following year. One question that frequently comes up about raffles is, if somebody purchases raffle tickets, is that a deduction for the purchaser? And the answer to that is no, because they're actually buying the right to win a prize. And the one thing that might be possible if the branch is a 501c3 and the raffle prize was donated, the donor of the prize might have a deduction there. So just being really clear that a raffle it's essentially gambling. It's a game of chance. And that is pretty much what we can say about raffles. Again, that the year has changed. It's now the 1st of January to the 31st of December. So for our planning year, you might have actually 2 sets of applications if you have a raffle in the fall and another one in the spring of 2 different operating or fiscal years. And so I guess, Kathy, we'll go back to you.
Yes. No, we can stop sharing. So
You do
now, now I think I can see in the chat, there are several questions, and we're doing pretty well. We wanted to leave closer to 30 minutes for questions. So Carol, you want to give us the questions?
Yes, so we have several. First of all, going back to the 990N and the 199N, can you just clarify that the 199N is also filed electronically as a sort of postcard? Someone could answer that. And
Yeah,
also,
I can.
Yes.
and also, do we get a confirmation from National that they have accepted that they're going to file the 990N?
Okay, I can answer on the 199N. Yes, that is also, it has to be filed online, and you will get a confirmation number when you submit it. They'll come back and give you a confirmation number. So
Great.
you will submit it online and you will have a confirmation as soon as you submit it. And on the 990, I think Jesse can answer that.
I assume that you will get a confirmation regarding your 990N if National is filing it. Since I don't file a 990N, I haven't physically received that confirmation. I file a 990EZ. So, Kathy, did you get a confirmation?
Yes, I did. And as I
Okay.
pointed out, when I went on the screen and through Hub and showed Beach Cities, they had what they were acknowledging, because I'd already filed for them to send the 2023 990 they were showing, yes, we've got that information, but they do send a confirmation after they've done the filing. They will send you an email. Then that's why they're saying who asked for this, who's the one that submitted the request, because then they'll know your email address and they will email you, yes, they filed for you. You will get it. It won't be immediate. It seems to take National a bit of time, but you will get that.
Great. We have several questions about receipts, gross receipts. So first of all, membership dues. And how do we handle membership dues if those are paid to the branch to be forwarded on to National? Is that considered part of the branch's gross receipts? And also, if a branch is receiving contributions that are going to be passed through to another organization, the branch may have a separate foundation that has its own EIN, or to the Special Projects Fund. So somebody could answer those specifics on what constitutes actual gross receipts.
Okay,
I
I can
would-
speak to that.
Yeah.
In terms of the IRS and the definition of gross receipts, for example, with membership dues, we are just acting as an agent for the national organization. Therefore, the dues that we are sending to National for both National and California are not considered part of our gross receipts. In terms of, what was that? Oh, and pass-throughs. Pass-throughs, it's not quite as straightforward, but if you are if you generally have a pass-through entity where you're not collecting any portion of those funds, and you are set up like something similar to the branch to national, and you're simply a pass-through agent, then no, it would not be considered a cash receipt for 990 reporting purposes. But I would check with my local CPA or someone similar and give him or her the specific details about pass-through, because there are situations where passing through funds to another organization would be considered part of your gross receipts. So you need to be rather careful in that area. My first answer is no, you wouldn't have to include it in your gross receipts, but I would have you check the details.
Yes, I think just to point out, sometimes especially if you're a 501c3, but even if you're not, you know that when you collect membership dues, some members will say, here, I'm paying my dues, I'm writing a check. You may have a form saying you want to donate anything. And some people, even if they're instructed to pay for, say, Tech Track scholarships, specifically to SPF, they will include it in their branch dues. And so all of a sudden, you've got an amount that you're depositing the whole check into your branch bank account, and then you have to turn around and pass it on to SPF. And particularly if you're at 501c3, I have counted that as gross receipts. It's not that much or big an issue, but we could, as a 501c3, we could acknowledge the donation to the donor. And so they got that acknowledgement letter from a 501c3 organization. And then because the donor designated it to go to Tech Track scholarships, we then forwarded the check to SPF.
So in terms of the donations to Tech Track, if you're a 501c4, if somebody is donating money to your organization, they're going to want a tax deduction.
Yeah.
And so they're not really donating it directly to your branch. You're just passing it on to the Tech Track folks at California. So that is clearly not a cash receipt for gross receipts reporting purposes for a 501c4. Totally different story with a C3. We are collecting the money, we're putting it in our bank account, we're deciding how it's going to be spent, and we're sending the money to Tech Track. So it does get included in our cash receipts for a 501c3. So you have two different answers depending on what kind of organization you are.
Thanks, great. So another question, if a branch is receiving contributions to cover operating expenses, do those also get reported as income on the various forms?
Afraid so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
The fact that you're going to use it for operations doesn't mean anything. You get a contribution for operations, you get a contribution for a scholarship, you get a contribution for all kinds of different things. Those contributions are all considered gross receipts for purposes of filing your 990 or your 199.
And on the other side of that question, are grants then for the scholarships or college expenses, are those considered expenses?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, just a second, Carol.
Yeah.
This also works a little bit if, like, with the Tech Track thing, depending exactly if you're a 501c3 or a 501c4. So if you're a C3, clearly if you give a grant to an individual, that is a grant expense and has to be reported on your 990 EZ, or if you're under the threshold, you don't have to report it. But if you're a 501c4, I think you have the same requirements for a 501c4. It's considered an expense. It's just a little bit different because of the fact that you're not a charitable organization.
Right, okay. One person asked if the 199 and 990 had not been filed last year, how do we remedy that? And I've had my own experience of taking over the Treasury when somehow the 990 had not gotten to the IRS and getting a big bill for late filing. So I think it's an important question.
For the 990, if you're filing a 990M and you forgot, if you forgot for 2 years in a row and you remembered and you got it all caught up, and by year 3, you have filed everything, you're okay. And you should just make sure that you're filing it timely. If you go for 3 years without filing your 990N, then you lose your tax exempt status. It's no ifs, buts, there's no passing go, you just lose it. And this is also true if you're filing a 990EZ or a 990. If you don't file for 3 years, you lose your tax exempt status.
Yeah,
So if you're in year 2, hurry up.
Yeah. File it now.
Yeah.
Great. One important question was, what is the personal liability of treasurers if these forms are not filed properly?
Oh, I can answer that. You know, you got bills from the state for insurance. And one of the reasons that is billed out to the branches is because D&O officer liability, director and officer liability, and liability to cover your branch officers when they're operating within the frame of AAUW mission and branch business will cover your liability there. So making an error, if somebody comes out there, they really can't go at you personally, and you have insurance coverage as well. So that's always a good thing. If you ever joined the board, that probably would be the first question I'd ask. Yeah, do you know insurance coverage? Yes, you do, and that's why you get that bill.
Good to know. Well, that I think covers the questions. There was one question about the branch address, and I think Jesse, you covered that pretty completely. That it is a challenge for the things where you can't use a post office box, because many branches, of course, do have a post office box so that they have an address that doesn't change. It's hard to keep those things up to date.
Yes. You have to have somebody volunteer their address, or if you're a corporation, they're going to have to volunteer somebody's going to have to volunteer their address to be used on that information SI-100.
All right. Last, any more questions? We're getting some good ones, but I think that sounds like we're just about right on target. So Kathy, I don't know if you want to give us any closing thoughts.
Yes, well, thank you all for coming. What I would also like, if any of you have comments on the format we used, if you have any suggestions for what you would like to see in the next 3 peer group meetings we have, we'd love to hear it. If you can't put it in the chat right away, you can always email me. Again, our next session will be December 7th, and it will go over quite a bit of information about the branch treasurer functions and reporting. So we want to make sure that we're really responding to your needs and interest in how that information is presented. And so be sure to put it in the chat box or let us know. Now, of course, we have been recording this session, and this will be picked up by the web team of the state, and they will post it to the website. I don't know how quickly they do that, but it will be posted if you want to go back and hear anything. but we also will be taking the Q&A, the questions that you put in the chat, and we're going to make that into a PDF so you have that information as well as the recording of this presentation. So if anybody has any feedback, we'd love to hear it. This is for you. This is for the branches. So if you think it should be done differently or something else would help you in addition to what we've done, please let us know, because we really want to make this a useful tool for you.
It looks like we might have missed a couple of questions, Carol, down at the bottom.
Yes, a couple
We
have
have
come
some
in.
just come in.
And I know that Kathy, you and I talked about that the 1099 issue was something we were going to research for a future event.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, but
What is the question?
so do we need to issue 1099s to the students who are getting
Yep.
scholarships?
Yes. Well,
Yes.
generally you do not. And Jessie can, she brought it up. She's been researching this as well. Typically you do not, but it's not just, okay, we issued a scholarship so we don't have to do anything. You do not issue a 1099 as long as it meets the federal requirements for that scholarship, which means it needs to be used for tuition, any of the costs that you need to take the coursework at the college. And it has to meet the requirements of what type of program and how you're using the scholarship. So that is something to be very aware of when you have your scholarships, and you could have the recipients indicate that they will use it within those guidelines. And then you do not have to issue a 1099.
So the question is Tech Trek, which is not a college function.
Right.
And it, before they were smaller amounts, but now they're up to $1,200, $1,500, and they're clearly over the $600 threshold. So we believe, my CPA and me, that we do have to file 1099s to those girls where it exceeds $600, because it's not real. It's a scholarship of sorts, but it's not a scholarship sort of college. So we are going to talk more about this, I think, in December.
Yeah.
And we will have more research on this, because it is a very hot topic, especially as it relates to Tech Trek and other big scholarships that we give out to returning students or going to junior college or what have you. So it's a big question, and we don't have the definitive answer, I don't believe, at this point, if it's not clearly in accordance with federal guidelines.
Right, because this doesn't fit, so.
The other late question was that the RRF form, it refers to income for both 501c3 or C4 branches, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, on these forms, I mean, you do see that in your raffle forms, it was your category that you checked off was dependent on whether you were a 501c3 or 4. And if you go onto the website, you will see that pointed out as well.
And there's another question here that the fact that a grant is given or is a scholarship to an individual doesn't determine its expense to the organization itself. So if you give a grant to an individual, that is an expense of the organization, a 501c3 or a C4. So it would go, if you're a 990 EZ or 990, it would definitely be included on your tax return. So the fact that it's a grant does not change the nature of the fact that it's an expense.
Right, and I think maybe just as a point of clarification, the main difference between a 501c3 organization and a 501c4 organization, both organizations, their income is tax exempt. The difference with a 501c3 is that donations to a 501c3 are tax deductible to the donor. And as Jesse said, that was why they converted their branch, and we did this back in New York as well, from a C4 to a C3 in order to make it possible for people to fund the projects that we were doing that were more costly than just our regular member dues could handle.
Charlotte,
So, and the last question I think is it possible to have one-to-one assistance with getting a branch current for a new finance officer? And we will be doing a session in the spring that is sort of the handover from one treasurer to the next. So maybe we can include some specific tips there.
But is the question asking if a particular branch can have a one-on-one session?
That's the question, yes.
Yeah, yes. So I'm sure if there's questions there, you want to go over specific issues that the branch is dealing with. Maybe they have to catch up the forms that haven't been filed. I'm sure we could set that up and identify who would be best to participate in that and set up a meeting that way. So you would the easiest thing to do is to send the query or the request to me at cfo@aauw-ca.org.
And on the RF1, I believe that that would include any raffle that was in the fiscal year that's being reported on the RF1. So it's the raffle that was within the fiscal year, not the one that's going to be coming up in the next fiscal year.
I think they meant calendar year, didn't they? On the raffle form.
It's very tricky because it's just like when you're making donations to the AAUW fund in national, and they make a big push because you have to get all the information into them by December 31st. So as the current treasurer, you have to take the first 6 months of the year, and then the second 6 months of the year that you're the treasurer, add that information up, and that is your calendar year. So if you have calendar year issues, as Carol mentioned, you have to think calendar year for raffles, but you are not on a calendar year. So you have to think through that in terms of how you file your raffle request registration form and how you report that, because you'll notice in the fine print that the raffle reporting says don't report anything after December 31st of this fiscal year or this calendar year. So it is confusing, but it is just like AAUW funds. You've got to get all the information in by December 31st.
For food, I had to put in the whole thing in the sink.
Oh, no.
Hang for it was like a freaking trail.
Oh, okay. Okay, so where'd you go?
I think we need you can mute.
What'd you have?
Good.
Uh-huh.
And then
Kathy, I don't know if you have the power to mute, but
Uh-huh.
fish fillet,
Yeah.
and then they gave me
What is that?
I think it might be
For free?
yeah, and they gave me a 20% discount on my slushie.
Why?
They said,
Okay, if you're having a third-party conversation, can you
Was it the same lady that was there?
Yeah. I remember speaking Mandarin. I was like, unfortunately, I don't think she remembers you. She's
Yeah, we haven't been there in years.
yeah.
see,
First
can
time?
you,
No. I've been here before. Oh, and she still had the bright Christmas tree. all lit up.
Can
We
you
have
imagine?
a third-party conversation going. If you can mute, if you're talking to somebody else.
Are you?
Yes.
Yes, if you can mute, please. Thank you. All right. So do we have any more questions?
I think that was the last question was about the date for the report of the
Yes,
raffle.
yes. Yeah, you're reporting pieces of 2 fiscal years. So you may have to pick up a prior year report. And that can be a little tricky, but all that information should be available to you when you take over as treasurer.
So, Indrani, the question specifically on the RRF1 is the date of the raffle, the previous raffle or the upcoming one?
It should match with the fiscal year, and it should not be for the current year, because fiscal year RRF one is going to file based on the fiscal year reporting.
Right.
So can I ask a question, Indrani? So
Yeah.
this is the first year that we have to do this December thing. So, and when I'm filing my RRF1 as of June 30th, 2023, I'm only including the 6 months from the whole year, or just the first 6 months of the current year?
If the rule has started from January 1st, 2023, raffle rule, is it, then you only include first 6 months.
I think you're going to, in the RRF1 is just looking what are your revenues. And so you're going to include any raffle that occurred in the fiscal year. So if you had raffles, from July 1, 22 to June 30, 23, you would include any raffle revenue that you had for that. And it doesn't fit the actual raffle reports, but it's just a different period. So when you go to that form, you're reporting the calendar year, but the RRF1 says, we don't care, what occurred outside our fiscal year. The raffles you actually ran in the fiscal year are reported in the revenues for that period.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you, Kathy. Yes.
And there's again a couple of follow-ups on the 1099, and we are planning to research this, and we'll include it in the December peer group meeting, because as Laura says here, that the grants were given in May, and obviously if Tech Trek there were a lot of Tech Trek grants that were given for last summer, and the 1099, we can try and solve that before the end of this calendar year.
Yes, I mean, you have, if you actually had to issue 1099s, and it's interesting because, one of the other things to pick up on the research is that the branch donated to SPF, and if the 1099 is going to be issued, it may come out of SPF. SPF, branches donate for scholarship. That's what they're doing. But the scholarship, the revenue that's being charged by the camp covers all the expenses of the camp. And some of those expenses are stipends. If you want to be a dorm mom, you could get $100, it's a stipend. And if you want to be camp treasurer, you can get $300. So the teachers get more. So we have high school teachers, let's say, or JC teachers who are teaching, and they get a stipend. If it's over $600, then, and teachers can get more than $600, they will get a 1099 from SPF. So even though the donation from the branch is going to SPF, and that is being used to pay the expenses of it, is SPF that issues it. So the question will be, and I will push that on to SPF, it is determined that any scholarship, or they're calling it sponsorship, so I think they have also researched that any sponsorship to attend a camp that is not a four-year college institution for a degree program or anything like that, would a 1099 be issued, and would they need to do it? You know, the interesting thing is, all SPF knows is that the branch did donate money. They don't know the campers. They don't know the individuals. They don't have any of that information. It's CampDoc system, the registration system, that has that information. So that's a very interesting question. I believe SPF has done some research. We'll find out what they learned. And then if it's true, since it is the branches who are sponsoring it by sending the money to SPF, which organization needs to issue the 1099, and how would they do it?
Clearly going to be a big topic in December.
Yes.
And somebody asked about instructions. It's very similar to going online and pulling up the 990 or another form from the IRS, and 1099s are exactly the same situation. You go online, you go to the IRS website, and you say 1099, and all kinds of information will show up. However, if you go, I believe if you go to the post office and certain office supply companies, they will have 1099s there. Pick them up early because they disappear fast, and you can actually fill them out. They are very, very easy to do. So if you need it, go take a look at your local post office, your local office supply store, or go online. The only difficult part about a 1099 is it has to be on special kind of paper. So you can't just send in any old thing to the IRS. So that's the only tough part about it. But as I said, you will be able to find those, or your local CPA will have them, or your enrolled agent.
And I think one of the other issues we have to look at, if these are really designated as something that should be reported on a 1099, we're not collecting Social Security numbers for our campers. So that's another thing you have to put on that 1099.
I think this points out that we need to do the research before we get too excited about the solutions, because
Exactly.
maybe
That's
it's
true.
a problem that doesn't need to be solved.
Yeah, 1099 has some rules, regulation, and nowadays 1099 has two different kind. One is non-employee consultant NEC, and other is the 1099 others. That's why this under 18 students, which category they will go, that we have to research.
Yeah.
Because these are the students, and they are not turned 18 yet.
Yeah.
And that is a very important.
Okay, more to come on that subject.
And we're hoping that the answer will be no, you don't. But
Yes.
Oh, hope so.
I think it's going to be, it depends.
yes. So we're
Okay.
hoping that it's structured in a way that it's not necessary, but we will come back with what the research tells us. Any other questions?
No?
All right. Thank you very much for attending. We look forward to seeing all of you come back in December. We have a very urgent bit of information we'll disclose then with what we find out on the 1099s or non-employee compensation. We will be going over that and quite a bit else, especially for new treasurers. It's useful information. And again, if you have any input, any feedback on this that will make these more helpful, please let us know. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye.